From a $5,000 startup in 1987 to a $122 billion tech giant accused of being a front for Chinese espionage, Huawei's journey reads like a corporate thriller that changed the rules of global business forever. But this isn't just about one company's controversial rise. This is the story of how the race for technological dominance turned into the biggest espionage scandal in modern history, where stolen robots, copied code, and diplomatic hostages become the weapons of choice in a battle that would reshape the entire tech industry. Founded in 1987 by Ren Zhengfei, a former People's Liberation Army engineer, Huawei began as exactly what you'd expect from a startup in late 80s China: scrappy, ambitious, and willing to do whatever it took to survive. The company's name literally means China achievement, which in hindsight feels like either incredible foresight or the most obvious case of corporate destiny in history. While Western companies like Cisco and Ericsson were charging premium prices for telecom equipment, Huawei came in with products that were 40 to 60% cheaper. By the early 2000s, telecom companies worldwide were asking the same question: how were they doing this? The answer, as we'd later discover, was complicated. Sure, Chinese manufacturing costs were lower, and yes, the company received substantial backing from state-owned banks, loans that totaled over $75 billion between 2000 and 2020, but there was something else going on. Huawei's products weren't just cheap. They were remarkably similar to existing Western technology, almost suspiciously similar. By 2012, Huawei had become the world's largest telecommunications equipment manufacturer. By 2018, they were the second largest smartphone maker, breathing down Apple's neck. Their 5G technology was so advanced that European countries were lining up to use it, despite growing concerns from their American allies. The company's revenue just hit $122 billion in 2019. Not bad for a firm that started by copying other people's phone switches, but success built on questionable foundations has a way of catching up with you. And in Huawei's case, that catch-up would involve copy-pasted manuals, stolen robots, and the most expensive corporate espionage investigation in history. The first major red flag came in 2003 when Cisco Systems, the undisputed king of internet routers, noticed something disturbing about Huawei's new products. They weren't just similar to Cisco's equipment, they were identical. We're talking about manuals with the same typos, software with the same bugs, and command structures that were carbon copies of Cisco's proprietary systems. When Cisco's engineers dug deeper, they found something that would make any lawyer's eyes light up. Huawei's routers contained actual Cisco source code, not inspired by, not similar to, actual chunks of copyrighted software sitting right there in Huawei's products like a smoking gun in a filing cabinet. The lawsuit revealed a pattern that would become Huawei's signature move. The Chinese company had somehow obtained Cisco's closely guarded source code and router documentation, then basically used it as a template for their own products. The most damning evidence? Huawei's manuals contained identical typos to Cisco's original documentation. Same mistakes, same spacing, same everything. It was like they photocopied Cisco's homework and forgot to change the name at the top. Cisco's lawyers presented evidence that Huawei had reversed engineered their products, copied their software interfaces, and even replicated their help files word for word. When confronted, Huawei's response was essentially, "Oops, our bad," followed by a hasty settlement and promises to clean up their act. But yeah, instead of learning from this expensive mistake, Huawei seemed to take it as a masterclass in how to not get caught next time. The settlement was sealed, so most of the tech world never heard the full details. Huawei got to keep operating, their reputation mostly intact, and apparently took notes on how to do corporate espionage more carefully. If the Cisco case was corporate espionage 101, the T-Mobile incident was graduate-level theft with a twist of absurdity that sounds like it came from a comedy movie. Meet Tappy, a robotic arm designed by T-Mobile to test smartphones by mimicking human finger movements. This wasn't just any testing equipment, it was T-Mobile's secret weapon for quality control, capable of performing thousands of precise tests that would take human testers weeks to complete. Between 2012 and 2014, Huawei was a supplier to T-Mobile, which meant their engineers had legitimate access to T-Mobile's testing facilities. What they didn't have was permission to steal proprietary technology, but that didn't stop them from trying. Huawei engineers photographed Tappy's components, copied its operating software, and measured its specifications during routine visits. When security started asking questions, employees were instructed to delete emails and cover their tracks. Yet, some international emails revealed the sophisticated nature of the operation. Engineers discussed taking measurements and collecting data about Tappy, while managers coordinated the information gathering across multiple visits. In 2017, a federal jury awarded T-Mobile $4.8 million in damages, but the real damage wasn't financial. It was the revelation that Huawei was willing to risk major business relationships for the sake of acquiring technology through theft rather than innovation. Here was a company with billions in revenue and thousands of engineers resorting to physically stealing a testing robot because building their own was apparently too much work. While Huawei was busy copying routers and stealing robots, Western intelligence agencies were tracking something far more concerning: the company's potential ties to Chinese espionage operations. Founder Ren Zhengfei's background in the People's Liberation Army raised immediate red flags, as did the company's financing from state-owned banks. More alarming were reports of Huawei's equipment containing unnecessary backdoors, hidden access points that could theoretically allow remote monitoring of network traffic. Multiple companies accused Huawei of similar practices to the Cisco case. From Motorola to various European firms, a pattern emerged of Huawei somehow acquiring proprietary technology and incorporating it into their own products. Western governments began accusing Huawei of acting as a proxy for Chinese intelligence, embedding surveillance capabilities in their technology to spy on foreign nations. The company's executives consistently denied all allegations, insisting they were a private company with no ties to Chinese intelligence, but the denials rang hollow when evidence kept mounting of suspicious activities and unexplained technological capabilities that seemed to mirror competitors' innovations with remarkable precision. By 2018, Huawei faced a unique problem. They'd become too successful. Their 5G technology was arguably the best in the world, years ahead of competitors like Ericsson and Nokia, but success in 5G came with unprecedented scrutiny because unlike smartphones or laptops, 5G infrastructure becomes the backbone of entire national communication systems. The implications were terrifying for Western governments. Every phone call, internet search, and government communication potentially flows through 5G networks. If Huawei controlled that infrastructure, and if the company truly had ties to Chinese intelligence, the national security implications were staggering. The United States led a global campaign to block Huawei's access to Western markets. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo traveled to dozens of countries with a simple but effective pitch. Do you really want the Chinese government to have access to all your country's internet traffic? When framed that way, the choice became less about technology and more about national sovereignty. Countries began choosing sides in what became known as the 5G battle. The UK initially embraced Huawei, then reversed course and ordered all Huawei equipment removed by 2027. Australia banned Huawei outright. Germany spent years debating, ultimately deciding to phase out Huawei equipment gradually. 5G rollout, which should have been a simple technology upgrade, became a geopolitical loyalty test. The arrest of Meng Wanzhou on December 1, 2018, at Vancouver International Airport transformed the Huawei scandal from a corporate espionage story into an international diplomatic crisis. Meng was on Huawei's CFO, founder Ren Zhengfei's daughter, and widely considered his heir apparent. The charges were serious, violating U.S. sanctions against Iran by allegedly using a subsidiary company to sell telecommunications equipment to Iranian customers while lying to banks about Huawei's connections to the transactions. But the arrest's timing and location raised immediate questions. Meng was detained while changing planes in Canada, not visiting the United States or conducting business there. The arrest looked less like law enforcement and more like a carefully orchestrated trap. Within days, Chinese authorities had arrested 2 Canadian citizens, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, on vague charges of endangering national security. The message was clear. If you arrest our executive, we'll arrest your citizens. Welcome to hostage diplomacy in the digital age. For nearly 3 years, Meng remained under house arrest in her Vancouver mansion, wearing an ankle monitor while her case became a symbol of deteriorating U.S.-China relations. The 2 Canadians remained in Chinese custody, living proof that the global tech race had consequences far beyond corporate boardrooms. The resolution came in September 2021 when Meng agreed to a deferred prosecution agreement that allowed her to return to China without admitting guilt, while the 2 Canadians were released the same day. The synchronized timing made it clear that justice, in this case, was secondary to diplomacy. The Huawei scandal's impact extends far beyond one company's reputation. It fundamentally changed how the world thinks about technology, globalization, and national security in the digital age. For consumers, the cost had been measured in lost innovation and higher prices. Huawei's exclusion from Western markets reduced competition in 5G infrastructure, leading to slower rollouts and higher costs that are inevitably passed on to consumers. The company's smartphones, which were genuinely competitive with Apple and Samsung, disappeared from most Western markets, reducing consumer choice. For the technology industry, the Huawei case established a new reality. Success in global markets requires not just technological innovation, but political acceptability. Companies now must consider not just whether their products work, but whether they'll be allowed to sell them in an increasingly fragmented global market. The geopolitical implications are even more significant. The scandal accelerated the decoupling of American and Chinese technology ecosystems, creating parallel systems that don't communicate or cooperate. Instead of one global internet, we're moving towards separate digital realms, a development that threatens the foundational promise of global connectivity. Was Huawei unfairly targeted because of its Chinese origins, or was it a legitimate national security threat? Were the company's alleged activities aberrant behavior or standard practice in an industry where technology advantage means everything? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Huawei likely did engage in systematic intellectual property theft and maintained concerning ties to the Chinese government, but the company was also caught up in a broader geopolitical struggle that made it a target regardless of its specific actions. What's certain is that this case changed everything. It demonstrated that in the digital age, technology companies aren't just businesses, they're extensions of national power. The global tech race continues, but the rules have fundamentally changed. Innovation alone is no longer enough. Trust, transparency, and political acceptability have become just as important as technical capability. How much are we willing to trade for progress, and can we ever separate technology from the geopolitics that surround it? What's your take? Was Huawei unfairly targeted, or is this a cautionary tale for the digital age? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you thought this was intense, wait until you hear about the Boeing-Airbus espionage saga. Click here to watch now.